Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with INTERPHEX 2016, presents INTERPHEX Live.
I'm Meg Snyder, editor of the Pharmaceutical Processing magazine. I'm here with Bill Warren, partner, IP practice group leader of Sutherland Asbill Brennan LLP for our INTERPHEX Live video conference. Bill, could you tell us a little bit about your company and what it is that you do?
Sure. Our company is a law firm, so we're a large general practice law firm with offices all over the country and outside the country in Europe as well. Among the many practice areas at Sutherland, intellectual property is the group that I'm responsible for. So we obtain patents for clients, we negotiate license deals, we investigate patentability and freedom to operate issues for new products.
Okay, great. And so, jumping into the questions, what are some of the first steps that you recommend for companies looking to develop a patent strategy with their CMO?
Right. I think the first consideration when you're engaging or interviewing a CMO to work with as a pharmaceutical company is to remember that everything should be confidential. So you want to enter into a confidential disclosure agreement or non-disclosure agreement. It's really the same thing. Those can be one-way or two-way would be fine. But you want to make sure that your discussions are going to remain confidential whether or not you end up engaging that CMO, because you're probably going to be disclosing very sensitive competitive issues for your ideas of a new product. Once you are in those discussions with the CMO, I think you initially want to be real clear on what is the scope of the project that you're engaging them for. Are they going to simply produce the product that you already know how to make and you're going to pass your formulation or recipe directly to them? Or are you engaging them for the actual research and development aspect to help you formulate a new product? Or maybe there's a co-development, so that often there's a little bit of knowledge on both sides and you're both going to be working together to develop something new for the market.
And what issues should a pharma company consider from an IP perspective when engaging a CMO?
So once you've engaged that CMO from an IP perspective, the most important thing to make sure your agreement covers is who's going to own the resulting IP. So to the extent that your CMO is needed for improvements or a new formulation, then you want to make sure the results of that research, if they are patentable, are going to be owned by you, the pharmaceutical company that's engaged them to perform those services. You also want to make sure that you own any of the data that is derived from the various R&D batches and failed experiments, as well as the successful experiments along the way, because that can help to build the story of a patent application that results from the end product.
So as far as the timeline, what would you say is the best time for a company to look to start patenting their products or processes, like clinical trials, commercialization? Like, what do you recommend?
The best advice is file your patents early and often. There is not a particular advantage to wait to file the patent application, particularly since a couple of years ago the law changed in the U.S. to be more commensurate with the rest of the world, and that is to award patents to the first party to file, and it's no longer a first party to invent. So as soon as you have a new development that you believe is patentable, in order to be the first party to the patent office, you want to go ahead and file on that improvement as soon as you can.
And what are some of the patentable inventions that a CMO might be expected to have?
So a lot of that will depend on the scope of the engagement, of course, of what it is you're asking that CMO to do for you, but you could be obtaining patents on everything from a new API, active pharmaceutical ingredient itself. If they are helping you with screening, for example, to identify the most active agent, could be derivatives of a known active ingredient, could be metabolites that your CMO is helping to identify, or enantiomers of a known molecule. Most typically, a CMO is going to help with formulations. Those improved formulations for sustained release, extended release, slow release are commonly patented and a good way to block the competition from copying all of your R&D effort. A CMO can also help develop new routes of synthesis for a particular compound that may be known. That's always advantageous to try to develop an ROS that has a higher yield or that has less expense involved in the production. So if a new route of synthesis is derived from the CMO's efforts, you most certainly want to try to patent that. A final area, or just an additional area, really there's sort of a continuum of patentable potential, but an important issue for patenting is the analytics of the final product. So an analytical method for testing and verifying that the composition is what you hoped it to be after manufacturing can be a patentable method, and that can be very valuable to have as well.
How can you be sure that a CMO reports these inventions to the customer?
That is another component of your CMO engagement agreement. You want to obligate them to make you aware of those patentable observations to the extent that they are known and appreciated by the CMO. Certainly it's not their expertise. It wouldn't be expected that the CMO would have engaged a patent attorney, for example, to evaluate that and then report it to its customer, the pharma company. But certainly to the extent that regular reports and the final report are due from the CMO to the engaging pharma company, that should include a requirement to report any observations for potential patentability and the data to support that.
Now, do you see any developing trends as far as, patents among pharma companies and CMOs? Are you seeing like certain things that are repeating themselves?
Yeah, I think so. I see a lot of collaborative work in order to obtain a patent for all of the CMO's efforts that have been paid for by the pharma company. So there's a lot more collaboration in terms of that data collection I was referring to. Again, it's not only the final results and the characterization of the composition, that was paid for that's needed to obtain a patent. Sometimes it's all of the failed experiments or the iterative development process data that helps demonstrate when the patentable invention was made and what distinguishes it from all the other failed attempts. So I see increasingly CMOs being asked to retain and report a lot of the data on the development process and not just the final result.
And how relevant are patents on analytical methods of evaluating the drug product?
Right, so they are particularly important. There was a Teva case last year that was decided by the Fed Circuit involving biologics and analytical techniques for evaluating the composition of the final biologic. And so there was some question as to whether the Hatch-Waxman laws, which permit a road to generic marketing, would protect that kind of a post-manufacturing activity under the safe harbor provisions of Hatch-Waxman. And it was decided that even though that analytical technique for the post-production batch confirmation was to develop information for potential submission to the FDA, it was still not protected under this otherwise very broad safe harbor. So patents on those analytical techniques of the post-manufacturing batch can be extremely valuable now, because competitors which are ramping up to go to the market can be blocked even before they enter the market based on that kind of infringing activity. It's not protected under Hatch-Waxman.
And, just to delve into the Hatch-Waxman, Act a little bit further, did you want to, maybe discuss how it shields pharma developers from patent infringements? I know you talked about it a little bit, but in case there...
Yeah, sure. Hatch-Waxman was passed in 1984, and as I said, it created a viable pathway for generic competition to come to the market to make more competitive drug prices. Many of the aspects of Hatch-Waxman that are in place to facilitate that include the brand name's listing of the patents that it believes are protecting its product in their FDA Orange Book, and then a procedure by which a company that wants to market a generic has to certify that its products will not infringe any of those listed patents, or that those patents are invalid, or that the generic applicant will wait until those patents expire. So there's an entire system set up for establishing whether the generic competitor can enter the market, and then of course Hatch-Waxman establishes a system by which FDA will allow the generic to rely on the clinical data of the brand name as a shortcut for its development costs.
So what about ensuring that a pharma company and the CMO are not infringing on third-party patents?
So, well, now I think related to this, I'll just follow up on the safe harbor provisions of Hatch-Waxman was that last feature. And that allows for any competitor to conduct otherwise patent infringing activities as long as it is in the process of the collection of information for potential submission to the FDA. So all of that pre-marketing activity to get ready to launch a generic competitor, including making and using batches of the drug that may be patented for regulatory submission to FDA, are protected under the safe harbor. So I think that's quite important. And then the aspect of those analytical, post-manufacturing analytical techniques are not within the safe harbor. But then I think your last question, sort of ensuring that the pharma company, before they launch, whether it's a brand or a generic, isn't infringing any other third-party patents. So it's really incumbent upon a drug developer of any kind to conduct patent searches before they invest too much in their R&D, or certainly before they have a product launch in the market. Typically, of course, a company is going to engage an attorney to do that, either an in-house attorney or patent attorney or outside counsel, to review the patent landscape based on the molecule or formulation that they're trying to bring to market. So you want to do those patent searches and know what your strategy is for avoiding third-party patents all along, whether that is designing around a patent to avoid infringement altogether, sort of a non-infringement strategy, or whether you need to think about, well, this patent is a roadblock, so we need to look at whether it's a valid patent, whether for a variety of reasons that patent can be challenged and taken down for perhaps its indefiniteness, it's not well described, it's invalid for indefiniteness or over the prior art. So it was not a new invention, or it was an obvious invention. And so the patent can be challenged in court. And that's another major feature of Hatch-Waxman, of course. There's a reward of 6 months of generic exclusivity on the market for the first generic filer to successfully challenge one of the brand name patents that's listed in the Orange Book, and that's called a paragraph 4 certification. So if a generic says, well, we don't want to wait until the end of expiration of the patent because we think that patent is invalid and shouldn't be listed, the cost benefit of Hatch-Waxman provides an incentive for companies to challenge such invalid patents and gives them that 6-month market exclusivity for doing so.
It sounds like it, the Hatch-Waxman engenders a high competitive side for, these different pharma companies. Is there a way for pharma companies and CMOs to kind of ensure that this, end of patent competition, trying to ensure that these patents are invalid? Is there a way to kind of address that in advance?
Well, absolutely. A brand company, a pharma company, really needs to be sure that it is prosecuting and filing valid patents to begin with. So they certainly don't want to, seek to obtain patents that can't withstand a challenge. So that's the first thing. There's also, as I said, usually more than one patent covering a particular drug product on the market, and those patents are filed in a relative continuum and therefore expire at different times in the future. So most typically, of course, an API, an active molecule is discovered, has some pharmaceutical activity, patents filed on that molecule itself. And as development goes further, perhaps a new route of delivery or formulation for a particular route of delivery is discovered working through a CMO or in-house development group. So 2 years later, another patent's filed on that particular formulation or method of delivery. That patent's going to expire later than the earlier filed compound patent. And then ultimately there can be new uses of the compound. So originally it was only appreciated that the compound treated one type of cancer, for example, but it was later discovered that it has a beneficial neurological effect, and a new patent could be filed on that second medical use or new indication. And all of these strategies are intended to evergreen the patent estate to protect the investment in that molecule for as long as possible.
Okay. And as far as, filing for patents between pharma companies and CMO and the coordination between that, how does it compare between, pharma companies that produce drugs versus biologics?
So I missed that a little bit.
Sorry, I put you on the spot. How, for companies that produce like drugs versus biologics, or such as like vaccines or things like that, is the patenting process similar, different?
Right, I understand. Well, of course, the process itself is the same in terms of preparing the application, prosecuting it to issuance. But of course, in biological systems, there is much more opportunity for more to file for more patents because of the complexity of the system. So there may be particular mutations in the protein that are made in order to make it more effective. Those modified proteins and modified genes are patentable. The vector system for expression, maximizing expression, can be patentable, and any cellular host system that is modified for that purpose. Then you have expression techniques. There's also a separate process for approval of both the biologics as well as the biosimilars than there is for a new drug application and a generic and application under Hatch-Waxman. Two completely separate regulatory pathways, as well as systems for the exchange of that patent information. I described a minute ago the Hatch-Waxman Paragraph 4 certification process for getting through the Orange Book listed patents for small molecules. Well, on the biologics side, there's another series of laws which are designed to dispense with or make an early determination of the patent landscape before the product goes to market. And that entire system under the Biologics Pricing Act is often called the patent dance, because the two sides go back and forth and exchange what they know about the patents that could potentially be asserted against the biosimilar manufacturer. And that is the source of a large amount of litigation right now as to how that patent dance is played out.
Along the same line with biosimilars, do you have any recommendations for companies looking to, since biosimilars are so new to the U.S., for companies looking to file patents for the creation of biosimilars?
Well, you want to look both at, on a biologic project, because of the complexity, you want to look at both freedom to operate issues we just described about avoiding third-party patents, as well as what can you do at each step to look at patentability for something unique in your process, your manufacturing procedure, that you can establish roadblocks for somebody coming up behind you. So just having regular meetings with your internal R&D team is one thing. And again, if you're engaging an outside CMO, you want to have confidentiality, you want to have ownership of any IP that they develop, and you want to make sure that they're required to have regular meetings with you about that development process so that you can ascertain whether anything they have come up with might be patentable. And one way to, if it's a smaller drug company engaging an outside CMO, and they are really looking at the CMO to develop, to do a substantial amount of develop, and cost is an issue, there can be a negotiation whereby the IP related to the drug product that the company is interested in bringing to market comes back to the company that's paying for the R&D, but that if there are any other uses for the platform technology developed by the CMO under the project, those could be licensed back by the CMO for use in other drug projects. That way, there's a possibility of a very good long-term benefit to the CMO, for which they could negotiate a lower cost for their service.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Bill. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Meg. It was a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you at INTERPHEX.
Yes, you as well.
Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with INTERPHEX 2016, presents INTERPHEX Live.